Armies around the world had just been shocked by the news that came so suddenly, as if nature had stopped breathing for a moment. No previous signs, no leaks, no clues. But exactly 12 minutes ago, cyberspace seemed to explode, and not because of a comeback, not because of a big award, but because a story that had been tightly hidden finally evaporated to the surface. A story involving two big names in music, two hearts that have gone hand in hand since adolescence to become global icons, Taehyung and Jungkook, not just group mates, not just friends. They are two souls who from the very beginning already had a strange, almost mystical connection, which is difficult even to explain by the camera lens or the lyrics of any song. The fans are always suspicious, always hopeful, and always second-guessing. But now, the puzzle no longer hangs. The veil was finally lifted, and what was revealed? Melted Mini Hearts.it all started with a cryptic post on an anonymous account that wouldn't normally appear on anyone's radar. A black and white photo of a handwritten letter written in ancient Korean was accompanied by a one-line caption that read, "It's time the world knew that there is more than just friendship." Within seconds, the account vanished. But the uploads have been stored, disseminated, and dissected by the army. And that's where this story begins, a story that takes us through hidden spaces on the journey of two young people who are now legends. The letter is later confirmed by dedicated fans who are experts at handwriting analysis, was indeed written by Taehyung. In the letter, a personal narrative is written about a sense of awe that turns into an emotional dependence on someone who is always there for him, without naming names. But when the word "magne" appeared, accompanied by the phrase, "He saved me in silence, even when I didn't know I needed to be saved," fans knew that only one name was possible, Jungkook. Since then, time seems to have stopped. Everyone took a deep breath, as if preparing to accept a reality that they never really expected, but secretly yearned for. Much has been speculated so far, but there was never confirmation. They rely only on a gaze caught on camera, a silence that feels meaningful, or a small smile that appears when each other's names are called in an interview. But the letter, although it did not mention names directly, was the first recorded confession in real form. And the contents of the letter are too honest to be fabricated. I never knew that a person could be home until I saw his smile on a stressful evening. He didn't say anything, just looked at me. But at that moment I felt enough. I feel at home. Quotes from the letter made thousands of fans hold their breath. No one can fake such wounds and sincerity. Every word felt like a heart scream that had been stifled for years, finally just spilling out on paper, shortly after the letter went viral. An old account belonging to BTS's debut-era staff suddenly reactivated after 7 years of giving no sign of life. He uploaded a photo that was never released to the public. Taehyung and Jungkook sleeping side by side on the floor of the training room, only wearing jackets, looking exhausted but peaceful. In the photo, Jungkook's hand clasped Taehyung's hand tightly, and the photo is nothing like fan service. It's real. It's discreet. It wasn't made for the camera. And then came snippets of old clips shared by fan-base accounts that managed to dig up from personal archives. One showed a brief moment in an old documentary when the camera captured Jungkook standing alone backstage, sighing heavily after the concert. Then in a barely audible whisper, he said, "I hope she knows I stayed here not because of the world, but because of her." The word "he," which has been ignored, is now a puzzle that unravels by itself. The puzzle pieces that were once separate now begin to form a surprising big picture. Every ARMY member who has been following BTS for a long time knows how close the two are. But no one expected that behind their laughter, hidden wounds healed by the presence of each other. Taehyung, with a sensitive artist soul and a wounded heart. Jungkook, with incredible physical strength, but an inner self that is often hidden behind a wall of kink. They met when they were both teenagers. Jungkook was only 13, and Taehyung wasn't much older. They didn't just grow up together. They form each other. When Jungkook didn't want to debut and almost gave up on training, it was Taehyung who wrote a small message on a sticky note, sticking it secretly into Jungkook's locker. "Don't go. The world hasn't seen the light you have." The message, known only to two people, has now been exposed, leaked by a longtime staffer who said he could not keep the secret any longer. Then, another piece of chat from the trainees' internal group that is no longer active appears. In one of those old screenshots, Jungkook wrote, "Today Taehyung said I can be anything. I'll never forget. I promise to stay here." A message that once might have been taken for granted by fellow trainees now feels like an eternal promise that finally reads in a different context. All this time, The public saw only the tip of the iceberg, joint V-Live moments, laughter in variety shows, singing duets in full harmony. But beneath the surface lies a much deeper story, a bond that cannot be wrapped in the word friendship alone, a relationship full of emotional depth, sacrifice, and perhaps love in its purest form. That night, as word of secret papers and pieces of the past began to stir social media, not a single representative from HYB gave a statement. However, it is the silence that actually speaks louder. There is no refutation, no hasty clarification. And it was in that silence that the army began to put together small pieces of the puzzle that they had only kept in their hearts for so long. Their story is not such a simple love story, as in a romantic pop song. It is a story of two young people who must strengthen each other behind the camera spotlight, facing the cruel pressures of popularity, as well as a world that often refuses to understand that intimacy does not always have to be labeled. Taehyung and Jungkook never asked the world to understand, but they kept putting little messages along the way in song lyrics. In a painting Taehyung secretly uploaded, in the tone of Jungkook's voice as he said Taehyung, in a way that only the two of them understood the meaning of. There is one moment that is now going viral again, a snapshot from a concert in 2019. Amidst thousands of flashing light sticks, the camera captured Taehyung sitting on the side of the stage, looking at Jungkook singing his solo part. At that moment, Taehyung's facial expression was like opening something he had locked tightly, full of admiration, emotion, and an indescribable sense of security. He bit his lower lip, looked down for a moment, then smiled slightly. Army used to just consider it a sweet moment. But now, after all the emotional evidence was revealed, that moment turned into a silent confession that was caught by accident. In Jungkook, it is not an easy person to open up. But as he produced his solo track, Still With You, fans began to realize that there were verses that seemed to be written for someone very specific, someone who was the reason I kept breathing in silence. The temple was once considered universal, but now it feels like a hidden love letter at one point in their journey. Even a relationship as strong as Taehyung and Jungkook's was on edge. It happened around 2018, a year in which BTS experienced an incredible surge in popularity. Everyone thinks they are at the peak of glory, but not many know that the peak is the most lonely, most tormenting place. They're exhausted. They run out of time for themselves. And what is more painful, they begin to move away, not because they want to, but because circumstances force. Taehyung, with his sometimes misunderstood introverted nature, begins to close in on himself. It's not as easy to joke as it used to be. He was more silent, alone in a corner of the waiting room, looking at his phone screen expressionlessly. Jungkook, who has always wanted to know everything about his Hyung, senses there is a distance. But she's also battling the pressures of popularity, personal growth, and the demands of an industry that requires her to be perfect every time. A source from the longtime staff revealed that on one of the overseas tours, there was a silent quarrel.